through your education, going from Vanderbilt and a seminary in the South to Yale, that's a big transition, I'm sure. Yeah. And it sounds like in the position that you're in now, a lot of what you're doing is trying to make arguments for Christian convictions in the public square with people who likely don't share those convictions and sometimes are hostile against them. So from your experience at Yale and now what you're doing on Capitol Hill, how do you make those arguments in a way that is not overbearing, but it still gets the message across?
Sure, yeah, and I think that's a really important question, because I think our current cultural moment has necessitated us to be better kind of interpersonal engagement, be better at that in terms of how we articulate those convictions. Yeah, I went to Yale for that exact reason. I wanted to sit across the table from individuals who I knew held a different worldview than I did, and I wanted to engage in an exchange or really hear them lay out the case for what it is that they believed, and to respond accordingly. And that kind of honed those skills for me. I think one of the most important things is to be a good listener, to understand that this is a particular individual with a particular narrative, a worldview, obviously, but I want to hear clearly, and then I want to make sure that I'm articulating at a level that meets and matches where that individual is in the particular issue that we're talking about. But you're right, it takes work, and when you're in an environment that is hostile or antagonistic to certain positions that you might hold, then it takes even more work in order to break down some of those barriers in conversation. But yeah, I enjoy it though, oddly enough.
Okay, good. You wrote in a recent article that it's true that right is right, so we shouldn't kind of waver on our convictions, but at the same time you say that it's possible to be wrong right. Right. What do you mean by that?
Yes, I think that whenever you're engaged in kind of a dialogue with an interlocutor on an issue, whatever the issue is, you have to think on different levels, and it's not just the conceptual level, right? I'm thinking about the concepts that I want to present, but I also have to think about how I'm being perceived, right? So there's the perceptual level. So I'm thinking in both of those spaces in terms of making sure that what I'm communicating is actually what I want to, in fact, communicate, and what the person is hearing is what I want them to hear. And I think in this current cultural moment, I think it is very easy to just kind of land on, well, I just want to communicate what's true, and I don't care how it comes off. I think that when you're trying to win not just a conversation, but when you're trying to win a person, I think you're going to have to give thought to how I'm communicating those concepts in order to make sure that I'm not being misunderstood, and that I am dealing charitably with the person who I'm engaged in conversation with. Yeah.
So it's really relational. It's not being just in the clouds of the ideas, but it's seeing someone and realizing where they're coming from, finding common ground with them as a person.
Absolutely. Because it's one thing to win an argument, and I think when you're dealing with people, and I'm kind of wired this way that, ideas, it's all about the idea, all about the concepts. It can be easy to forget that you're dealing with a person, and from a distinctly Christian perspective, you're dealing with an image bearer, and I want to deal with them accordingly. So
a related issue that we've seen a lot in this election and across the country, especially at college campuses, is the political correctness culture, and also the push against that from conservatives, often Christians, who see this as a restricting of their ability to really say what they think and what is true. What's your take on that? Do you think each side has some truth to what they're arguing for?
Yeah, that's a good question. I do. In general, I try to carve out nuanced positions for myself across the board on issues, and I think this issue is no different. I do think that there are things to be concerned about in terms of how our conversation is progressing in the public square. I think there are certain engagements and transactions and assumptions that undergird them that I don't think are helpful for the long term. And you see that on college campuses and then at your local Starbucks. I think there are certain things that we do need to have honest conversations about. But yeah, I do, man. I always want to be sensitive to individuals who are feeling like in any given environment they are not being regarded rightly, that they are feeling like, they're being attacked, marginalized, whatever. I want to be sensitive to that. At the same time, I want to affirm the fact that we don't want to seek to extract from our cultural conversation ideas and thoughts that we don't like and that might offend us for the sake of trying to create this space of kind of neutrality where everyone can be affirmed and nothing can get done in terms of the pursuit of truth or intellectual engagement or what have you. And so, yeah, I try to carve out a nuanced space that says, we do need to make sure that we're being thoughtful in our everyday interactions. And a lot of the issues that have caused the most controversy has been things that relate to how we reckon with historical realities and how those realities have implications for our present day. I think that that's a challenge for not just conservatives, but everyone to make sure that I am, articulating in a thoughtful way and that I'm being careful and with my words. But also, as I'm doing that, I don't want to totally capitulate to a culture, again, that says because of a particular conviction or belief that may not be popular in today's culture, that should be removed from the conversation. I don't think that's helpful either. So I want to be sensitive, I want to be thoughtful, but I also want to make sure that we are pursuing these issues vigorously and are doing so unashamedly in some regard. So, yep.
You described that nuance really well in a recent article. You said, while censored speech is certainly problematic, unsanctified speech is just as poisonous.
Yes. In that piece, I'm writing from a distinctly Christian worldview to a largely evangelical readership, and I'm saying, I'm really critiquing what I've found to be a prevailing assumption that in the kind of PC conversation, there's only one extreme to be concerned about, and that is the extreme, again, of kind of censoring ideas and thoughts that, I don't like or that I might find personally offensive. But there's another extreme that I think the Christian needs to be concerned about, and that is that unbridled speech, right? So whenever I hear, a frustrated individual, kind of say, well, I wish I can, just say what I want. There used to be a time when I can say whatever I want. I said, well, for the Christian, that has never really, I think, been the goal. I think the goal has always been for the Christian, gracious speech, or what the New Testament writer would call speech seasoned with salt. So this unbridled tongue, I think, is just as dangerous as this censorship agenda that's going on. And I want to say that, no, we want to avoid both of those and seek a more excellent way.
Taking a step back from college campuses and especially secular college campuses, in the evangelical community, I see this tendency for Christians to almost take an opposite take on discourse instead of just wanting to fight with each other and being up in arms about issues. I think there's often a certain Christian charity, and which is good.
Yep.
We're supposed to be charitable, as we just talked about, and warm-hearted. But at the same time, I see that sometimes detracting from pursuit of truth and being able to actually grapple with some of the hard issues that we need to grapple with to reach truth. So how do you balance on that kind of opposite side, people who want to be communal, want to love their brothers and sisters, but also should be pursuing truth in a way that might, ruffle some feathers every once in a while?
No, that's good. And the work that I do, I speak, for the churches of the Southern Baptist Convention, but part of the ERLC speaks to the churches and trying to equip them to be able to navigate some of these difficult issues. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think one of the temptations that is seemingly always approximate for Christians who are thinking about engaging in some of these things, I think the temptation to passivity is always right there around the corner. I think one of the things that we have to remind, particularly evangelical community, is that yes, we want to make sure that we are kind of bathed in love in how we engage individuals, but don't let that be at the expense of truth, because actually when you do that, that's the most unloving thing you could do. Actually, if I think about not being honest about a particular issue, now again, that may be received as my opinion, but again, if I'm thinking about how I believe my beliefs, if I'm not being true to those beliefs and sharing those beliefs, because I want to be loving, I think that actually undermines love. And I think that actually undermines charity. I think I want to pursue love and pursue charity while advancing those things that I hold near and dear in terms of convictions, and actually view that as loving in the process of doing that, because I know what's at stake. As a Christian, there are realities that we have affirmed in our worldview that transcend the here and now. When you have those kind of things at stake, there is really no time to not be truthful and honest about what we believe.
So one last thing,
Yep.
Which might be reiterating some of the things that you've said already, but one last word of advice, one last thing, place where we can maybe change our perspective or a step that we can take as individuals to better our discourse in this country.
Going back to the piece that I wrote on political correctness, I mentioned the fact that really in this discussion, you're going to resign yourself to a posture or disposition of just being mad, and that's going to characterize how you engage, when you engage, whether that be live, one-on-one, whether that be on social media, or I'm going to view myself as being on mission. And I stated it just that way. You're either going to be mad or you're going to be on mission. I think that to resign oneself to a posture of just perpetual frustration, I don't think it's going to be helpful. I think what is going to be helpful and what I think people need to see modeled is how you can have conversations in the public square about the most controversial of issues, and to not give oneself over to anger, frustration, resentment. I don't think that's the way this country is going to move forward. Right now, we're trying to have a national conversation about how are we going to get along when you have these different and competing worldviews. And I think the big question looming over all of that is it possible, right? That you have this increasingly diverse and plural environment. Is it possible for us to live together under a certain set of principles, the Constitution, right, except what have you? Is that possible? And I think when people survey the land of our cultural conversation, I think people are concerned. They're like, well, you know what, obviously it's not, because that doesn't look too peaceful. So I think we're going to need people modeling and showing paradigms of what it looks like to live together peaceably, even as we disagree over the most central and foundational of truths. And so seek to be someone that someone looking at you would want to emulate. And I think that keeping that in mind would be helpful as you go about your day.